Hi patrons, Scott here. I just firstly want to thank you for your support through Patreon, and it's much appreciated. And I hope you enjoy this video. This video is on depression, and I'll probably make another video, a more generalized video on depression for INFJs for the main channel. But I wanted to sort of share at least my own personal experience with this. Now, on one hand, it's kind of I've never really identified myself as having struggled with it. And as the video unfolds, I think you'll understand why. But when I've looked back over my life, especially my teen years, I can sort of identify that I had this kind of consistent low-grade depression, and I think there's specific reasons for that I'll explain in this video that might other INFJs might identify with. So depression is there's on one level it can be seen as quite a simple concept, but the way it sort of plays itself out in the world and in people's worlds can be very complicated and complex. And for me, I think this low sort of baseline depressive feeling, because it was there as a consistent thing, and probably from when I was quite young, I and I think people around me didn't recognize it, especially 25, 30 years ago. Things were seen like depression and mental health and all those things weren't really seen the same way as they are today. And because it was it was sort of a low level, it was kind of undetectable. Although people would wonder what was going on for me at various times because of maybe some of that melancholy presentation that I would have at times. But I want to kind of look at it in two ways. There are two main reasons that I think this existed for me growing up. One was growing up in a family that had some problems, had some issues going on, and I won't go into that here. Only to say that my parents separated when I was about 7, and there was a lot of moving around that occurred during my childhood and adolescent years, and I think that certainly had a bearing on it. Had a bearing on the way in which I felt, and so on. The other side of it, it was like maybe compounded it, was and this is looking at it way further into the future, that discovering that I was an INFJ, had INFJ personality traits, I recognized that for most of my life, and especially those years, I didn't know who I was and nobody else did. And so I grew up not, like you could say, not fully alive. The way I sort of see that, and it's sort of bringing some psychological counseling topics or themes here, is that we need to be mirrored. Ourselves need to be mirrored growing up, in order for that mirror, in order for what the person's doing to be real. And an example of that is if like there's a disturbing video on YouTube where there's a baby who's very happy, and it was a sort of an experiment, and the mother's also engaging and smiling, and there's a lot of connectedness going on. She's mirroring back that warmth back to the baby, and the baby's mirroring it back, and it's just this lovely exchange. And then they show the video where she is just flat pan face, no expression whatsoever. And within a minute, the child's still trying to play and be happy. And then all of a sudden the child's met with this, it was actually a baby, met with this blank face. And you can see the child react to this. And within a minute or so, the child is crying quite strong, in quite a strong way, because of the anxiety that's being produced by not having that mirroring take place. So it's a long way around of saying, if we're putting ourselves out into the world, but what we're putting out isn't mirrored back, it's like it doesn't exist yet. It's hard for it to exist, and we learn to kind of shut down parts of ourselves and only really live from places that, or from parts of ourselves that get mirrored back from our culture or from our family. And as we know, for most people watching this are INFJs, there's huge slabs of INFJs' reality that is unrecognized or misunderstood, not received, and so it's not mirrored back, it's not validated. And so I think that that's one of the main reasons why I had this sort of low level depressive feeling, although I didn't recognize it at the time, was that I wasn't able to be fully alive, because who I was and who I am wasn't being validated, affirmed, acknowledged, noticed, cared about. Some of that was other people's issue, but a lot of that is that we only can really mirror back to others what we understand about ourselves. So from a personality type point of view, when we have people in our lives that don't have NI as their dominant or auxiliary function, it's just missed for the most part, and the culture doesn't really recognize it either, and so it gets lost, gets missed, and so I think this sort of low level, I would probably be more comfortable using the word sadness. It was like just a low grade sadness, a bit like someone walking around like wanting to be recognized for who they are or understood, but not knowing that that's what's going on, because how do we know that as a child growing up? It's not until we get a bit older and we find other ways of getting our needs met and things like this that we recognize, that we start to recognize who we are and then what we missed out on. But that was kind of what it was like for me. It was like I was walking around with, think of a light switch with the dimmer. You can be fully bright. And I think I was walking around, might sound like a contradiction, but it was like I was walking around with it, just like when you turn it around, the knob around, and you start to get just a sort of a glimmer of light. That glimmer of light was like how much I felt alive back then. But that would suggest that if that was the level of aliveness that I felt, then surely I was deeply depressed. But I wasn't really. It was a low grade depression or sadness that kind of just was there, that I had no idea was there. So it wasn't until later in life where, like in my 20s, that I started finding some things out about myself, about life. It's like when you step out of your own family of origin and into other realms of living, you start to be exposed to concepts, ideas, people, interactions that help you to get to know yourself a little better. And it wasn't until that started to happen that I was able to recognize, I wasn't too happy back then. And slowly through my 20s, that light has started to sort of turn up, get a bit brighter. It wasn't until I found the Myers-Briggs and had done a more work on myself, and it was like my own personal heart work and dealing with my own issues that took place in my 20s. But it kind of needed to. It wasn't until I sort of discovered the Myers-Briggs and introverted intuition and sort of read on that and like, in a sense, reading that, reading about the INFJ personality type was a sense of it mirroring me. And so that really that process really turned that light bulb up to full. And where I started to get a sense of how I tick, of what is important to me, why I've had some of the challenges and struggles that I've had, and all of that. So anyway, I hope you've enjoyed the video. Feel free to share your thoughts on this topic, and I'll see you again in another video.